Hello, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami, and it is my great joy today to be with Gita Matlock. Gita is a resident of Ananda Village now, and we'll be talking about her story. Full disclosure, I knew Gita's parents before there was a Gita. We've been friends for a very long time. So I had the pleasure of watching her grow up, but as an adult, our paths haven't crossed nearly as often, so this is my chance too to also talk to her in a way that I rarely get a chance. So Gita, I think people would love to know a little bit about your upbringing at Ananda Village because that's a unique heritage that only a handful of you share. So tell us about just a little bit about what it was like to be part of a community from when you took your first breath, basically.
Well, it's thank you, Asha. It's really in a way hard to describe, but I very recently sat down and did a free-flowing journal review of the first 12 years of my life. And I walked away with the word magic because it as a child in an environment like Ananda Village, which is this beautiful space, 800 acres, natural forest, but then also filled with deeply seeking yogis of a certain vibration. And at the time with Swamiji there, it just magic. I mean, magic happened. I have all these memories as a child. Most memories are outside, surrounded by friends. There were many children actually when I was a little one here. It was, I would say, a boom of children in my youth. And so it's outside memories, memories with other children, but really these moments where there was real magic, where I'd be walking home from school at a unreasonably young age for anywhere else in the world. I'm like 5, walking alone, and that's unheard of in a lot of American youth of my generation. And I'm talking to the clouds and I'm watching, the birds, and I'm feeling this deep connection through nature to God that was like deeply expansive. And this place just holds a space for magic as a child. There's just a vibration, and anyone who visits here now I will attest that you come and you just feel better and you feel uplifted by being on the land. But as a child, you're just like a wide open, sponge for your environment. And all the adults are doing their best to be their best selves. And that has, so that you're sponging up all the joy and attunement, and you're not even aware of it. But it makes just so much beauty. I mean, so much beauty.
Did you feel that you were raised as a disciple of Yogananda? Did you put Master's name on what you were experiencing, or did your parents do that to you? I mean, how did you live in relation to the path at the age of 5?
My parents definitely did not put anything on me, and I don't know how they tuned into that or when exactly, but I loved their meditation room, and I would just go in there and sometimes have really deep experiences sitting there and meditating in my own way. In the classroom, we have a school, the first Living Wisdom school, and my teacher, first grade teacher, Narani, taught us to meditate. I have these, again with the magic, these memories of, she would take us to this grove of trees, and we would each get to climb our own tree, and we would hug our tree. And then we would close our eyes, and she would stand in the center of this grove, and she would talk us through a visualization meditation, hugging a tree. And I mean, you can almost laugh at how innocent and sweet, but it was like, it was heaven. That tree and I became friends. I'd slide down that tree's branch. it's just, so I was exposed to meditation and spirituality a little bit at school, although certainly from a universal, not this particular path perspective. But then we had Sunday school, so I would hear the stories of Yogananda's youth. But at home, it wasn't, it was there, but it definitely wasn't forced at all. It was just my parents were meditating, and we would sing a prayer at the meals, and we would do spiritual events. But Master was just mine. Yogananda was just mine. So I would just talk to him in the clouds on my way home from school. And I think had it been more structured, I probably wouldn't have had the same experience very quickly.
So when did you become officially a disciple? When did you make an adult decision to be confirmed in the faith, or however you want to call it?
I was 19. Uh-huh. I was in college at Pepperdine University, and I had finally, I think I read the autobiography of a yogi for the first time at 14. Uh-huh. And I actually remember running out into the living room to my parents and saying, "Why didn't you teach me about Kriya?" Huh. They were like, "Well, you never asked."
I was going to ask, what was their answer? Well, you never asked. That's a good answer.
Yeah. So, but I, already by then I felt like Master was mine. It was just not a question. But at 19, I said, okay, I want to do whatever you do. What do you do? And so my parents, my boyfriend at the time also, I introduced him to Yogananda, and so he was really enthusiastic, and we did our discipleship ceremony together in the woods with my parents.
So you had your parents initiate you as disciples? It's really a unique experience, isn't it? So you must reflect back and think about, in the astral world, you had some very definite decisions about what you wanted in the astral world, you think?
I think there are no accidents.
Did you ever feel, the word I want to use is, did you ever feel that your upbringing was narrow because of that?
Narrow? No. I went to public high school, and I think that was just right, where I had this cocoon of safety and sort of uniformity of vibration for the first chapter. And then in the natural point when independence and differentiation and all of that needs to develop, I went out into the world. And there was a lot for me to take in. But I wouldn't trade it.
Was it traumatic or was it exciting? Were you able to cope is actually the question. Why was there a lot to take in? What was it that was different?
I was certainly able to cope, but I was also recently reflecting on that first few years. And I had exposure all of a sudden to racism.
Oh, racism.
I walked into this public high school environment. My parents moved to Seattle at that time, in a suburb. And I walk into my first public school environment, and it's this suburb in Seattle, Washington. And there are these kids who consider themselves like cowboys, and they wear big hats. And then there are kids, a whole group of Black kids who stick only together. And I walked in, and these kids were fighting. Literally after school, getting in fights and going to prison.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
And let's just say that was a huge shock. And I think there's a natural thing that happens at 13, 14, where anything that's not, I think your hormones are raging, and anything that's not working for you can make you really angry. I got really angry at injustice.
Oh, injustice. I see. Yeah.
You know, so I became really, I mean, you wouldn't see it on the outside because my demeanor is always like kind of kind and
Mhm.
mellow, but on the inside, I became like raging angry
Mm.
that people were treating each other this way.
So what happened at 19 that suddenly, or not suddenly, but why at 19? I mean, except for the fact that you're suddenly old enough to make a decision.
Well, that's something. Well, you know, there was this arc which I think is totally easy to point to being developmental.
Mhm.
But you know, I went into that anger and then an experimentation phase,
Mhm.
and then came out the other side with, oh yeah, I remember who I am.
I see.
Um, and barely knew who I was at 19. I still feel like I'm discovering who I am every day.
Mhm.
But I was a lot more clear, at least, about who I'm not
That works.
and what matters. And so I had gone through that arc of anger about injustice to gaining some skills to do something about injustice to circling into, well, what do I do about myself?
Mhm. No, that would be the question. When you start asking, how can I change? I mean, you came from a context where Kriya was right in front of you, so you knew. So did your life change radically after you officially became a disciple, or was it a smooth continuation?
Um, I would say that it was pretty smooth from there. I had already at the ripe age of 19 let go of a lot of the experimentation stuff phase that I had been in for a little while. I was pretty wild
Mhm.
in that period. My mom prefers to just not know what happened in those probably 3 years from 16 to 19.
Uh-huh.
She just goes, la, 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 la.
Uh-huh.
So I had let go of a lot of things that were really disjointed from my spiritual life. But then it was sort of, it wasn't an overnight change from there. It was a gradual shifting from there.
So what did you study in college?
International studies and political science.
Was that was the refinement of your rage against injustice?
Yes, that was definitely wanting to understand the systems of our world, the power structures, how things worked, who was vulnerable to what. Um, and I had an internship where I worked for an organization called the International Monitor Institute. And what they did was they have a library of video footage of human rights abuse.
Good Lord. That's not
Yeah,
like Saturday night entertainment.
definitely not. And they're the library for the International Criminal Court to pull on proof.
Right.
So I was connected with a journalist going to Colombia. And at the time, Colombia was the drug center of South America. And so the number one cause of death was murder in the country. So I was connected to this journalist. He was sending me material and I was cataloging it, what I was looking at. And, that was where I was. That was like taking this injustice and saying, I'm going to support the justice system that will put an end to this.
Well, I'm going to skip forward. You're still quite intense on these things all these years later, which is not that many years later, but years later, how have you reconciled all that you experienced and all that you were feeling? Are you still the same person? Have you shifted octaves on this? Tell me about this now.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I do feel that I've shifted octaves quite a bit on it. I also, because I have a lot more just understanding of the context of why there is so much darkness in the world.
Summarize that for me. What is the context of why there's so much darkness in the world?
Because it's a perfect balance against the light. And because we're here to learn what really is truth. And we learn that through experience of both what is not and what is, right? So we're the school that planet Earth is. Also understanding that we are in an age that is just coming out of quite a dark age, just a few hundred years out of the darker period. And there are places on Earth that really haven't come very far. But even those that have come very far have a very long way to go. Until we're, could we be in Treta, please? But we're not. And so I think I've come to accept a little bit the context of the consciousness of planet Earth. But injustice is still a big issue for me. Understanding, and it's the octave it takes now is compassion. So when I see people holding on to ideas, explanations of our world that get in the way at all of their compassion and empathy for others' suffering, I definitely get triggered.
You get triggered. So what does it mean to get triggered? That's a phrase that people use, but what does that mean for you?
I have to take a deep breath. I get angry.
You get angry.
And it's not, I know that's in me. So that's where I take a deep breath. But that
wasn't deep enough. That was too shallow.
That was too shallow. Okay. Full yogic.
Full yogic all the way through.
But yeah, it's something, it's a part of, and I think where it comes from, like what my understanding of it today is that what I'm here to do in this world is connect my experience in knowing to others from out in the world who don't have the same experience in knowing, have a different experience than me, and be that sort of connection point. So as long as I hold open to a compassionate view of humanity, I can be that bridge. But when I let that shut down in myself, when I let judgment come in, when I shut that down and I am unable to connect with that person. And, I've definitely had to look at, okay, that anger. I'm angry because you're prejudiced. Wow. Is that the solution? Like, I just shut myself down. So, I can see why there's that trigger for me, but my process is to learn not to let it shut my compassion down.
Do you feel drawn to political activism? I mean, people at Ananda choose all different levels of involvement with the world, which is not a very good phrase because we all live in the world. I mean, who's
right?
Because none of us are not in this world.
Right.
There's more attention to the ups and downs of the world. Are you one who feels the need to really be involved in politics or in public affairs? Is that an interest of yours?
Yeah, it's an interest of mine. I would say it depends. My involvement is living in Ananda Village. My involvement is pretty at a distance.
Okay, that was the question.
I
have children. You have a husband and children, so it's not like you have a lot of free time.
Not a lot. I took my daughter to the Women's March in Sacramento this year.
We'll see. Okay.
And we had a lot of fun together. So there's a level of involvement in it, and I read a lot of just sort of contemporary political issues. And I really enjoy watching leaders like Malala Yousafzai or Greta Thunberg doing what they're doing in the world.
Well, that is, that is not, I don't think there's any such thing as a typical Ananda person, because every Ananda person I know is
Yeah.
just odd.
Amen.
I sort of use that word and I'll just leave it there. But having a serious interest in the political world is a unique calling. I know you've also worked. Maybe you should give us a summary. I know you've had jobs in the nonprofit service sector, or however you would call it. So what is it exactly that you've done so far?
It's mostly been in fundraising and communications, but I've worked for a couple of humanitarian organizations. Mm-hmm. One in particular, CARE, I was at just before I came and worked at Ananda. And they're a long-standing organization they're in 60 countries, and they do women's empowerment work, but around the whole spectrum of from health, maternal and child health, education, of making sure equal access to education for girls and boys, but nutrition work, advocacy work around issues like child marriage.
So unlike me, for example, who is a random example that I know well, who I feel compelled to work on those issues by working only on consciousness. Mm-hmm. But you feel your Dharma is different than that. Is that true, or is this a phase you're passing through, or do you think this is really who you are in a longer rhythm?
I don't think it's really who I am in terms of the Dharma of my work, mm-hmm. But I do feel that my ability to understand and relate to a really wide swath of the human experience is a part of my Dharmic work.
It's very interesting.
I don't know what that will look like. I actually am in what I would call a midlife crisis.
Okay.
In like the best possible way, where
you're in a 1/3 life crisis. Right. You're okay. Then go ahead.
No, it's not quite midlife. I mean, unless 80 is the end for me. Could be. But it's this moment where, you're looking at where the road has taken me so far, mm-hmm. And asking that question, why? Why do I have these interests? There's got to be some purpose, some way that this is going to end up translating to what Master has in store for me. Because there's no accidents. I
remember when people had asked Swamiji about political activism, and there was a huge anti-war movement, things like that going on during the course of decades. His answer always was, if you're going to do it well.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And that means do it with divinely inspired energy.
Right. Yeah. And I can't say that political activism or humanitarian work is what I came here to do. Mm-hmm. I just feel like there's a reason that I took in all that information. And I don't actually know it yet.
Well, very interesting. I've certainly found as a disciple that everything that was important to me, I would almost say almost any lingering karma that I've had, Master found a way to make sure that I got the opportunity. Mm-hmm. That there's no, I'll ask you a different kind of question. I was part of the founding generation of Ananda. We came to the property you're living on when there was nothing there. And I lived there only for 16 years, so I didn't see 50 years of growth on that land. But I watched a lot of things go from nothing to something. But you grew up in that. Now you've come back. Where do you think Ananda, as a whole entity, not just Ananda Village, but as as Master's movement. In 10 years, I and my tribe will be either incapacitated or genuinely off the planet, but the whole crowd of us will go. And there's an interesting reality to Ananda, which is we almost skipped a whole generation. There's my group, my tribe, and then there's your tribe. So it's like you'll step into leadership at the same time we did, which was in our late 30s. If there'd been a group in the middle, you would have had to wait till you were 60. But I think the world has changed a lot in that interim period. So, as a person who thinks, for whom Ananda has been a very important reality, where do you think it's going to go? What do you think its future is after people like me are not even here? That's a big question.
That's such a big question. We all think about this, right? And I feel like my thoughts on it keep changing as time passes and we see things happening. I suspect that it will diversify. I suspect that there will always be this central vibrational core that is of the sort of the same the Sevaka vibration that it's been given to hold to the center. But I suspect that over those 10 years and then the 20 and then the 30, and I hope that it continuously diversifies, because I think that being able to develop your attunement and your relationship with Master and Swami needs to be internal first. And that if we are listening inside to what we are being asked to do, it may come out and look quite different than what's happening right now because of our own karma and our own path. And if we're doing it right, there will be lots of space for that.
When you speak of the Sevaka vibration at the center, define that for me. What is? How would you call that?
I would say it's Swami. If you're listening to, I would say sit down and listen to the oratorio. And you can just put that right in the middle.
What does that awaken in you when you listen to the oratorio? Who are you after you finish listening?
I'm love and peace and calmness, but also supremely detached from the world. And it's, not in an uncaring way, because that would clearly trigger somebody like me, right? I'd run for the hills. But but in this very calm acceptance of the world, but sort of moving past and beyond and up, just vibrationally higher than that.
But then it could lead you to great involvement, but great involvement with that vibration. Is that a correct way to say it?
Oh, you mean with the world?
Yes. I mean, does after you finish the oratorio, are you ready to go off to a cave? Are you ready to pick up your pen or whatever your weapon is and be an instrument for the light? Which way does it feel?
I don't quite know how to answer that, because I feel like when I finish the oratorio, I'm just ready to go meditate. Maybe the cave is more that truth for me, not necessarily for everyone else. But yeah, but there's, creative works and Ananda. There was so much that Swami gave that was just seminal.
Yes,
it's just the start.
Yeah.
And we won't know where its next step is unless we start to take the next step. And we may take the wrong step, but we'll probably, if we're continuing with our inner relationship, we'll figure that out at some point.
As you go. No, that's exactly right, Gita. Very good. I mean, very good in the sense that I'm not your teacher, but I mean, yes, that's a very interesting and excellent way to think.
But in that next phase, in order to take those steps, we have to try.
Yeah, we have to try.
And it really is going to come out in a lot of different, it's going to look many things, and some of it will work and some of it won't.
Well, then welcome to the past as well as the future.
But that's where I feel like it'll just keep growing because it's seminal, and there are all these steps to take, to walk. And we can't walk them. We aren't Swami. We can just do our best to tune in and then see where the road takes us.
I think that's a very good last line for our conversation. We'll see where the road takes us. Thank you very much, Gita, for sharing with me. It was very, very interesting to talk to you. And
Thank
bless you in all that you do.
Thank you, Asha. It was a real joy.